All right, guys, so here we go. So everybody, welcome to the Advanced Conversational Hypnosis Strategy Guide. So what this presentation is going to be about, guys, is a in-depth summary of everything you guys have learnt, whether you came to the first, second, or just the previous training we've just completed, the strategies, the tools, the methods, and all the insights that I taught you guys in and during these seminars. I've put together in this presentation to give you a step-by-step guide. Now, I say that word guide very lightly because we all know, based on the demonstration you guys saw, this style of therapy is not really a 1, 2, 3, 4 type step system. It's really an amalgamation and a lot of repetition of the same steps, sometimes in order, sometimes in back to front order, but really understanding the principles of what makes this style of therapy so conducive to really quick changes. But I've done my best here to sort of give you guys a step-by-step guide as best as I can, but also you guys have to remain extremely flexible when using this strategy. But this should bring a lot of new insights and a deeper understanding based on what you guys have been taught. Alongside this, guys, I highly recommend constantly not only watching the training, but also watching the demonstration breakdowns. I'm going to be over the next couple of weeks and as we go further into future trainings, I will always be breaking down these demos. So just be prepared for those. We've done about 5 or 6 already. I'll make sure those are attached for you guys as well. But hopefully by watching this, having a more intellectual and logical understanding of how this works, having done the training, seeing the demos in action, plus the demonstration breakdowns with commentary, you guys will be able to grasp this system very, very quickly and really master therapy. And I mean, beyond what all your colleagues and also what your competition is doing with therapy and coaching, which we know is all about techniques. It's about steps. It's about timelines. It's about telling your client what to do, forcing your client into trance. As you guys know, so far, we don't do any of that stuff. So without further ado, let's get into the ACH, the Advanced Conversational Hypnotherapy Strategy Guide, and let's go through this piece by piece. So let's look at the introduction to conversational hypnosis. Now, this was the intro. I pretty much give it every start of the 2-day training, but here it is just in a summary so we can get us in the right position for what's ahead. So in order to understand this style, you cannot think in the old traditional therapy ways. So the old traditional therapy ways are basically what's usually taught in about 99, if not 100% of the other therapy and coaching institutes. And that's normally the normal lectures that are provided, normal steps that are taught. And we cannot think in those ways if you want to commonly use or if you want to confidently use conversational hypnosis, because conversational hypnosis, as you guys know, goes against what everybody else is saying you have to do. And this is a more substantial strategy to use once you drop all those old things. So as a part of this demonstration and this presentation, but also as you progress further in your career, you can start to drop those old ways just to remain more flexible to this new style. So it's a good indication to know that if the old traditional styles aren't working for you or your clients, because you could be experiencing problems with this old traditional stuff. If you're lacking in speed, like it's just taking so goddamn long to help your clients, unsure what to do at certain parts of the therapy, clients essentially not getting breakthroughs, which is not a good thing, having to do multiple sessions, having to prepare for hours on end, writing or buying scripts and all of that sort of stuff. And you all know this as well. If you're ever in like one of those Facebook groups where everyone's saying, what's the best script for anxiety? What's the best script for stop smoking? You definitely want to get away from those things, because those things not only lock you into a corner, which is very unflexible, we know that they're just treating the symptom, as you guys have experienced. So you must think differently and drop all those old things to really understand this. So here's the thing. A lot of this conversation hypnosis style is based on how we think, or how you guys think about this whole thing we call hypnosis. Gone are the days when it's like the hypnotic suggestibility tests, it's the actual trance itself, it's the walking down the steps, it's the regressions, all those old school hit and miss style therapy. This is not what this is about. It's not about the language patterns either. It's to create a deeper perception of what is going on with your clients, not about what's going on with you, not about how you think, not about what you think is the best technique. It's understanding your clients. It's to understand their mindset. around their problem and why they're stuck. It's not solving the problem. It's just understanding why they are stuck. It's not understanding what you should do about it or how to solve it. So it's not about what you guys are going to do to help your clients. It's not about what technique you should use, which is going to be best. It's just understanding why a client is stuck. And when we investigate why a client is stuck, that's when all the brilliant things start to happen. So here's what you must think if you want to really master this, guys. What does a client, not you, what does a client need to think in order for them to change the relationship to their problem? All about them. It's not what can I say, not what language pattern or technique can I use. It's not what can I think, like I think a regression is best. I think timeline is best. It's also not what I can do. How can I solve this problem for my client as quickly as possible? It's about what do they need to think? What do they need to think in order to perceive their problem differently? And the funny thing is, therapy has nothing to do with you as the practitioner because it's your client's problem. So if it's your client's problem, what the hell are we spending so much time thinking about, preparing about, learning all these techniques? Because it's these techniques that keep us stuck in the thinking of, I must do something. Instead, you guys are going to understand your client's problem better than they understand it themselves, then lead them and nudge them away from their problem so they can find the solution. It takes all the pressure off you. So here's the thing. My goal with every client is just to understand the perception, okay? That's the perception they have to their problem, the conclusions they have made, and almost find the kink, the flaw in this conclusion. We know when a client creates their own problem, it's just because they've concluded that this is the way the problem has to be, and this is what keeps them stuck. And this is the same thing for my problems, your problems, and everybody else's problem. It's to find the flaws, and all conclusions have a flaw in them. They're never 100% accurate, thus freeing a client from the knots they are caught in. So hopefully that summarizes, being that you guys have been on the 2-day training, I hope that really summarizes everything we did. And when we come at a place from this point here and drop all the old associations and all the old conclusions about what you think therapy should be, it gets so goddamn easy to solve your clients in a very quick fashion. So there's the introduction. So let's move on. So here's a timeline. And this is a flexible timeline because some of this stuff needs to be repeated. Some can actually be missed. Some can be iterated and changed based on your own style, but really the timeline remains the same, but sometimes parts of the timeline will change, as you guys have probably seen as well. But here's my best attempt at keeping it on the straight and narrow, so to speak. So number one, we always start here. This is the one thing that remains the same, which is the investigation. From the investigation and number one, we move down to number two. As we start to investigate the problem, we're going to start to hear the knots, the unconscious moments, the conflicts, the parallel realities. We'll start to really get a really in-depth understanding of our client's problem, not solving it, but just understanding the problem. Because here's the awesome thing. Once we understand our client's problem, it then automatically and organically moves into step three, where they start to have new insights about the problem. Therapy and trance starts to actually happen by itself. And from there, we can use things like metaphors and silence and process instructions to focus our client's attention on this new insight. And that's all therapy really is. And from here, the insights, the knots, the conflicts, they all start to organically break due to the nature of putting attention on them, and new insights come out, new understanding, aha moments. It's when your client, something like the light bulb goes off inside your client's mind and they just get it. And this breaks through their old perception where they were stuck. So from there, once our client receives the new insights, we want to test these things. We're going to test the new insights. From number four, and guys, don't worry, I've made individual slides for each part of this. That's sort of where we're going with this presentation, just going through it quickly now. From there, number four, we get the test the new insights. We want to make sure that the new thing they have found is resourceful. Then number five, we repeat the same thing. We want to keep making sure that we break all the knots. Clients' problems don't just exist in one place. There are various knots, various conflicts, various of conclusions that all assimilate and are attached to the major core root core problem. And as long as we untie all those knots where our client is completely given choice about basically everything they want in their life based around the problem, that's when they have this massive breakthrough. It's not just solving the one problem, but solving all the knots are associated to it. From there, once we know all the knots have been broken, our client is just tranced out, exhausted, cannot think anymore, testing has run perfectly. Then we're going to test again to test the whole thing, everything we've done, all the new insights, all the problem, all the new resources. We're going to test everything as a whole. We're going to test it out for the new problem. When they've passed that testing mechanism, we do a quick demarcation, and then we do the integration, the speech, the sleep tasking, or the conscious tasking in step 8. So where you will find the most amount of time is here. Okay. I would say towards the end of my career and for the bulk of my career, I spent probably 60 to 70% in the investigation phase, and the last 20 and 30% was testing. It just got so quick that I could actually skip a lot of the more traditional steps and just got quicker and quicker and quicker, as you guys have seen with the demonstrations. So that's basically the timeline, guys. We're going to go through it step by step, but that's where we're going. And that should be fairly obvious to you guys because you saw that in action. So let's look at these steps more in depth. So to start off, let's look at the advanced conversation hypnosis principles. So what a lot I was talking about through the seminar is something called detaching. So here's what I mean by detaching. So number one, you wanted to completely detach from how hypnosis should look and should sound. You also want to detach from outcomes and solving your client's problems. Detach away from the size of the problem. Don't think, well, this problem is bigger than that problem. Categories of problem. Don't start thinking, well, ACH can only be used for this problem. It can't be used for anything else. You want to detach from that. Detach from caring about your clients. Remember, when you start to care about your clients, you now go into fix-it mode. You now go into caring about them, and you want to solve their problem so much that you actually block them from solving the problem for themselves. You want to detach away from prearranged techniques and scripts. You also want to detach away from conclusions to where all problems come from. I can't tell you the amount of people that tell me they know where all problems stem from, where all problems are being created from. This is just a conclusion, and all conclusions have a flaw. And you also want to detach from even how breakthroughs should look and sound. If you're too busy looking for a certain breakthrough that looks a certain way and sounds a certain way, you'll miss out on the breakthrough that really happens. So here's the thing. When a client can no longer perceive the problem in the same way and has choice in their thinking around their problem, that's when the problem does not exist anymore. So when I say detach from everything. As soon as you start to attach to certain things being a certain way, you'll now put pressure on yourself. And whether you know it or not, you'll now start to perform. You'll now start to violate all the rules about solving your client's problem, using techniques, applying this, applying that, coming with your own conclusion about where all problems come from and stem from. When you do this, you now lock yourself into a position that is not flexible. I go into a session not assuming or concluding anything. The only thing I know to do is ask a client what their problem is. And from there, I follow principles, not techniques. So number 2, if you're feeling pressure, it means you're trying to do something specific. So you want to be very, very aware of how you're feeling. And also if you're putting pressure on yourself, if you are, take a step back. It just means you're trying to do something. It's so ludicrous to think that when we stop doing something, things will actually happen. When you try and do something, you'll hit a brick wall. Number 3, do not separate problems into categories of size or intensity. However, you still want to work inside your means and your scope. So just bear that in mind. Number 4, regardless of the problem or the symptoms or who your clients are, always start in the same place. Slow down to speed up. Take your time. What's the rush? Investigate the problem. Don't investigate what technique you're going to use to solve it. If you rush any part of the intervention, you will slow it down. Number 5, and I think a lot of you guys really enjoyed this, there are no wrong questions in the investigation phase. All roads lead to Rome. Some take a little bit longer, some are dead ends, and some are very quick. You'll find a shortcut. That's just the way it is. The more experience you get with this, the quicker you'll get to Rome every time. Next is ask questions with the least amount of words and no solution-based questions. So when you do your investigation phase, it's always best to just ask questions with the least amount of words. Don't put hypnotic language or any ridiculous stuff like that in it. Ask a question in its most simplest form, least amount of words. Ask questions also that no one will ask. I know a lot of you guys enjoyed that as well. Number 6, please forget about single sessions, multiple, or length of time. As an aggregate, your sessions will become quicker. But when you're trying to force a single session out of somebody, that's when you'll slow it down. Okay? You won't speed up by trying to force a single session. You'll slow it down. But when you just don't care, things happen at lightning speed. Treat real problems, not symptoms. Remember, when a client comes in and we ask them what the problem is, most of the stuff that comes out of their mouth at that time is complete rubbish. And how could it not be? It's just their best example and their best guess as to what's going on inside their own unconscious minds. And also, do not prepare for anything. What are you preparing for? What can you prepare for when you know that the majority of the stuff your client's going to tell you is absolute garbage? So there's no point preparing a session based on symptoms because you'll hit a brick wall. Number 7, all clients find their own solution and choice, choice to how they want to solve their problem. And I know people outside the training say they live by this rule, but then they go and apply techniques. So you're already violating that. Okay, so when I mean clients will find their own choice, they will. You just got to get them to that trance place where they can do it. Your goal is to lead them there, which is essentially trance. And that's just a metaphor for the breakthrough. Number 8, clients do not have to go into quote unquote trance, eye closure, catalepsy, drooling on themselves. They don't have to go there, because if we're forcing them that place, now we're telling them what to do, but also now we're looking for a certain type of hypnosis. Remember what I said at the top? Detach from how hypnosis should look and sound. If they don't close their eyes, so be it. If they do, so be it. If they get really confused, so be it. If it seems like they're logical the whole time, so be it. Okay, so clients do not have to go into trance or have a massive on-the-spot breakthrough. Do not go looking for specifics. All clients go into trance their own way and have breakthroughs in their own way. Number 9, you have to allow processing time and integration time to occur. We know this is called natural unconscious emerging phenomena. This is our aha moments into a solution. Number 10, and this is the most important one, hypnosis and trance, like the formal stuff, we could call that just the fun stuff, becomes the icing on the cake. But that's where everybody focuses on. I literally think people believe that you put someone into trance, you give them some suggestions, some formal suggestions like you'll feel great, you can do it, you can build a 7-figure business. And then they wake their client up and they think these suggestions have just gone directly into a client's mind and that's all that needs to be done. This is garbage. That's not the way hypnosis works, because all you're doing, if you put a client into trance, they're just going to bring all those old knots with them. Okay. And it's very hard to get a suggestion to work if it's just tied up in knots. So the therapy and the untying of knots, the unconscious moments, etc., are what creates the breakthrough. So if we do all the therapy and the breakthrough first, you don't have to do the hypnosis stuff afterwards. If you want to, that's fine. Or if it happens naturally, that's fine. But it means once your client goes into trance, they're a complete open, it's like a clean slate. It's like an open field of choices. But if you put them into hypnosis without untying all these knots first, they're just going to bring all those knots with them. That's how it works. So they're the advanced conversational hypnosis principles. That's the stuff we live by. That's all the stuff I talked about on the program as well. So let's keep moving on. So let's look at the hypnotic interview, the investigation phase. So this is asking the who, the what, the when, the why, even though why, I want to try and stay away from that question. All of those things, let's say we put these things together. So an investigation. So the purpose of the investigation is to understand what the problem really is. Whether you want to call it root cause, core problem, I don't really care. The label is irrelevant. So in doing so, you'll be asking investigation questions that force your clients to retrieve unconscious, and that should say unknown information. I apologize for the typos there. So think about this. We're almost killing 2 to 3 birds with one stone. By asking a client what their problem is and asking the right investigation questions, some of the questions they won't have an immediate answer for. And that's the whole point. If your client gives you an immediate answer, that's a conscious answer. You can ignore that. But we're after the unconscious answer, the unconscious information. So the way they're going to look for that unconscious information, knowing that the problem is unconscious, is they have to go into trance to retrieve the information. So the better the questions, the more they have to retrieve the information unconsciously in a deeper way, the more they go in and out of trance. Eventually that trance is going to catch up with them and they're going to have that massive breakthrough. Okay. So the very fact of doing this allows for trance, unconscious moments, knots, and conflicting realities, which are really all the same things, to present themselves. Each knot, and a knot is just a metaphor. It's the conclusion your client has found themselves. It's the knot they've tied to say, this is how the problem is. So each knot that is untied slowly breaks down the overall problem and frees your client from this negative position, thus allowing them to connect to new choice. So over the right-hand side here is a description or a little metaphor for what the problem is. So we've got the main core problem, and you can see on the outside this orange circle, this thick membrane around the problem. That's what the knots are created of. These are all knots that are tied around the problem. We've got knot in conclusion number 1, number 2, number 3. There could be 15 knots. Then once we break all these down, this membrane gets broken down, and the problem that our client is stuck in, our client's stuck inside this circle, this problem, can now be freed to go looking for the solutions outside of the problem, because that's where the client's solutions are. They're everywhere where the problem is not. Okay, with a K and an N. So if a client's stuck in this problem, we untold these knots, now they have freedom and they can go looking for the right solution, and then they can live in a place of solution rather than problem. So that's just a metaphor for the way I look at therapy. That's really as simple as it needs to be. So number 2, the investigation should always meet your client at their problem. That's why we start asking, what's your problem? You don't want to assume. You don't want to even assume just because a client has booked in on a strategy call about their certain problem. Remember, that's just their symptom. Okay, when they come in, I start in the same place. What's your problem? I want to meet them at their problem. I don't want to tell them what their problem is. I definitely don't want to do the trance stuff straight away because I have no idea what they're talking about. So these questions create momentum in the problem and make it malleable so it's easy to nudge a client away from the problem and into a solution. So number 3, solution-based questions should never be asked. So get those coaching questions out of your head when you ask things like, what would life be like if you did do that? How would that look if your problem was gone? What would happen if you didn't solve your problem? How would your life be different? They're all asking for a solution. What I instead want to find out is, what makes you stuck in that problem? What's the mindset you have around thinking that you are stuck in that problem? That's where I'm digging into the problem rather than trying to find a solution. So a lot of the coaching questions and even some therapeutic question should never be asked because they're all based on solutions. And the reason your client is sitting in front of you is because they don't have a solution. And sure, you can have a conversation back and forth and make them feel a little bit better. But if you're not investigating the problem enough to break all those knots down and those conclusions, now it's just a happy conversation, but the problem's still going to exist. So don't ever ask solution-based questions. Instead, you should dig into the problem. Okay, so you want to be digging into that problem instead. So number 4, our goal is to take our client everywhere their problem is not and allow them to choose the best solution for themselves. Wow, there's a lot of spelling mistakes in this. I apologize, guys. We did do a spell check, but obviously it hasn't worked. But regardless, we're taking our client to where the problem is not so they have unlimited solution. Now, look at the word here, unlimited. There is no way in the world you should be telling a client what their solution should look like, feel like, or sound like. Because how the hell would you know? Your client has a lifetime of experience and millions of iterations about what the solution would be. And if you tell them what it is, you are now limiting them. And if it's the wrong thing, which it will be because it's based on a guess, now your client's going to have a very subpar breakthrough. So just let your client figure out all their own shit. Your job is just to ask them the right questions so they can do that and they can be freed from their problem. They can find their own solution. They can go in a trance the way they want to, and they can essentially tell you how they want to be therapized. You don't have to do a goddamn thing except just be there for your clients. So also with the investigation questions, part 2, there are no wrong questions. The only important thing about each question is the response you get. It's not the language, it's the response. Each question will nudge your client away from the problem, making it more malleable. Now, sometimes the questions will make your client make a back step. Sometimes it'll be a step forward. Sometimes you'll take a couple of steps forward, then 1 step back. Sometimes you'll take 5 steps back, ask one great question, and go right into nudging a client so far out of their problem, they don't know what is up or down. That's just the way it is. It's never a straight line. Number two, there are only two types of responses. So we ask a question and we're going to get two types of responses. And only one of these responses is worth listening to. Conscious information. Conscious information is where your client just vents and rambles on, and there's no unconscious moments attached to it. They don't even have to think about the answer. They just give you an excuse. That stuff, ignore. And if you get that conscious information, just ask another question about something else. It's that simple. Unconscious information is always going to be attached with an unconscious moment or a UM. You'll notice that your client has to think. Sometimes they'll go into trance really deep. Their eyes will start to blink. The normal unconscious moments that will happen, your client will get confused. Sometimes your client can't even answer the question. And if that's the case, keep going down that road because that's the shortcut to Rome. So when you see these unconscious moments, we'll get more formally into how to treat them. But when you find out this unconscious information, question the response they gave you. Just keep going down that road. It's like unconscious. You're stacking the unconscious moments on top of each other and keep following that direction to reveal more unconscious moments. With enough unconscious information, you'll start to untie, you'll begin untying all the knots and causing a deeper trance. So here's some options with the questions. It could be a what question, which adds specificity to it. It could be a when question, which is like a time frame or a location. A who question could be a relation to the problem. A why question, although I want to try and avoid these because they become a reality strategy. Sometimes you can throw them in, or it could be a how question. It's an effect. So just cycle through all these different questions and notice the responses, not the question itself. Okay, and we've done, if you were there for all three of those trainings, you'll know that we spent probably 70% of those 2 days, if not 80%, on the investigation phase because it's so important. It's basically, realistically, when you look back on it, it's one of the only things you really need to do that's of any use. The rest of the stuff can be used, some can be forgotten, some can be skipped. But as long as you get the investigation phase right, you'll nail this every time. So let's look at spotting unconscious moments. So as you start to ask the questions, you've got to be looking for these unconscious moments. So as you begin asking questions, you may start to see these UMs. Take your time with this, but at certain points, when you are noticing your client tranced out, start to use process instructions or even question the unconscious moment and ask your client, like, what was that? This will now draw their attention to it. Okay, attention equals fuel. And again, I apologize for the spelling mistakes, but you get my points, guys. So whenever you see an unconscious moment, draw attention to it. It could be as simple as, your client trances out, thinks, looks at you and smiles, can't really answer you and say, hey, what's going on now? You're now asking them to describe the unconscious moment. The very fact of them describing the unconscious moment will deepen it. So also at the same time, you can use process instruction. You do one of the two here. So a process instruction, this is a real Ericksonian trick, is a short statement that ratifies or grows the unconscious moment to further induce the trance. Think of talking directly to your client's unconscious mind and telling that part of the mind to do more of that. So if my clients, and I don't want to do this straight away, sometimes a little bit awkward at the start of the conversation, I might wait a few rounds before I start using this specifically. Let's say I'm a couple of minutes into the interview, I've asked half a dozen questions, and I'm really starting to notice that my client's really starting to daze off. They're tranced out. They can't really answer my questions. But when they do give me some sort of response and I see the unconscious moment attached to it, I'm going to say something like, there you go. It's like I'm talking directly to that unconscious moment. Or I might say, that's it, getting closer now, all the way now. I'm basically saying go all the way into that trance. Or an Ericksonian one is, that's right, or more of that, or that's it. There you go. There you go. Getting closer now. And you'll notice that your client, it'll feel a bit awkward and odd, but when you start seeing the response from that and your client's going so far into trance where they can't even keep their eyes open, or their eyes are open, but they're so tranced out, means you're doing a great job. And that's the whole idea of unconscious moments. So note, this is a special note, use repetition of the question you asked. So if you ask a client a question like, what stops you from quitting smoking? And they literally can't answer that question. They sort of look at you dumbfounded with a little smile on their face like, I have no idea what's going on now. I feel strange. Look at them intently, put a smile on your face and ask the question again. You could say, that's it. There you go. But really consider it. What makes you think you can't quit smoking? something like that as an example. I don't even know if that was the same question, but you sort of get my point here. So the answer they gave you will also deepen the So if a client gives you a response, you can repeat the response. So there's a lot of versatility with unconscious moments. You can repeat the question again. You can repeat the response. You can use a process instruction. There's many things you can do with this, because usually what caused the unconscious moment was the question you just asked before. So all at the end of the day, whatever one you decide to use, as long as you're putting attention on it, thumbs up, you're doing the right thing. So secondary to that is what I call spotting unconscious moments and the ETM, the emotional trance method. So along with this training you guys did, there'll also be a short masterclass on the emotional trance method, which is just isolating that specific tool. But there's a demonstration I'm going to have you guys watch with Tracy, was in the second training that we did. And you'll see me use the ETM and break it all down. Here's an example. It's just another way to use unconscious moments. Once you spot the unconscious moment, ask your client, what was that? Or what just happened there? We just talked about that before. Now, your client might explain that they are starting to, explain the unconscious moment, the thing they're feeling, as like a symbol. Or they might be confused, or they might say, I'm feeling really strange, or I feel really confused. Or in Tracy's case, she said, I feel like I've got butterflies in my chest. It could be an emotion. Once they tell you this, whichever one it is, focus their attention on it, repeat it back to them, start to use that as a metaphor. So what this is the unconscious mind may represent the unconscious moment or even the solution. In Tracy's case, the butterflies were a solution, which is crazy. So even a solution as a symbol, it can be the very thing that rapidly changes your client's problem. So example, like I said, watch the session I did with Tracy's in the second training, and how her solution to solve her problem, which was the COVID breathing issues, was feeling butterflies in her chest and stomach. And it's a brilliant demo. It worked out really, really well using especially the emotional trance method. But here's the thing. I didn't come up with that. I didn't know Tracy was going to see butterflies. The last thing, it could have been anything I could have thought of that I would have got wrong. She told me that, so I utilized it. Okay. So you can also refer to the ETM emotional trance method masterclass for an in-depth training on this specific part of the advanced conversational hypnosis. You guys have access to that as well. So pretty straightforward, unconscious moments, put their attention on it and use them all. Don't wait for a better unconscious moment. Always use the ones your clients present to you. So now let's look at what happens really when a client starts to experience those unconscious moments, when they start to feel the trance, when we start to untie the knots, the parallel realities that they'll present to us. Let's have a look what happens here. So insight and trance. So as your client perceives the knot or the parallel reality, focus their attention on it. So as you're asking the questions and they give you like a parallel reality, like, I really want to quit smoking, but I really enjoy it. I want to be up, but I want to be down. I feel like I'm lazy, but I'm also running 5 businesses. Okay. It's usually that but type word in the middle. You want to focus their attention on that because that's the knot. And sometimes the insight to that knot where they think, actually, that doesn't make sense, is enough to destroy and untie that knot. So this attention will break the knot and release some more unconscious moments. This could come as emotions, laughter, pain, any sort of release. In some cases, a formal trance, which is like eye closure, might be observed. So sometimes when you ask the right questions, untie a knot, your client will drop straight into trance. Like you have no control over it. If they do, let them go. Just keep them in a safe place. If so, use process instruction to guide them into that trance as mentioned before. Hopefully you're starting to see how flexible you need to be here. So the guiding into trance is what we call shaping the trance. Essentially, it's the unconscious mind in total control, and the trance is the mind rearranging and reconnecting and rejigging the new connections and choices it has found. This might occur several times with each knot that is being untied. So think of each knot as like its own problem, its own session. That's the way I look at it. And if you can untie 5 knots in 45 minutes, it's like they've had 5 sessions in 45 minutes. That's why this stuff's so powerful. Remember, anytime you send your client home with a knot that's been untied, with a knot that hasn't been untied, that's an extra session you're going to have to do. You may as well just do all of them there. So alternatively, once all knots are untied, a deep trance can take over. Regardless, whenever you see a client's eyes closing, struggling to keep open, guide them into this trance with the process instructions and use, if you want to, therapeutic strategies, which are on the next slide, to keep them in the trance. If you want to see an example of that, Watch the second training again. I think it was actually before we did Tracy's demo. Actually, might have been, yeah, it was actually after, sorry. You can see the one I did with Dinara, where Tracy's eyes were open the whole time. She had the butterflies, whereas Dinara went into like the full formal eye closure trance. Then she came out of it. I tested it and found more knots. I untied the knots and bang, she went back in. So she went in about 2 or 3 times. So these are clear examples of what I'm talking about here. And just go watch those demos. It'll be crystal clear for you guys. So now let's look at the therapy. What do we do once a client's in there? Well, you've got many choices here as well. So therapy. Therapeutic strategies can be used to further shape a trance and keep a client's attention in that place. That's all it is. You're just keeping them in that trance. You could use metaphors, which are examples of things that the mind can draw meaning from. It could be stories, maybe movies you've watched, books you have read that could relate to the breakthrough. Doesn't really matter. My favorite is silence. Let the trance do its thing. Sometimes talking in the trance stage can actually interrupt it. Think of it as putting the cake in the oven and letting it rise. The demo with Dinara in training number 2, you'll see that as well. I'm actually talking to one of the students at Deal while Dinara's in trance. I wasn't even talking to her. And she was processing, she was in trance, having all these hallucinations. And it was basically the same as me keeping quiet. And I prefer silence over anything else. Now, you might be thinking, well, Scott, how do I know when to tell a story or a metaphor? Well, you don't force it. If you feel like talking, talk. If a story comes to mind, say it. If a metaphor comes to mind, say it. That's the only time I say them. Is sometimes like I'll start telling a metaphor or a story and I'm halfway through the story thinking, oh God, I didn't even know I was telling a story because I didn't create it. I didn't force it. It just happened to come out of my mouth and it happens to come out at the right time. Number 5 could be like hypnotic phenomena, like hand levitations, hallucinations, doesn't really matter. My favorite is always silence. Just keep your client in trance, keep them safe. You could even use process instructions. So as your client's in trance, instead of telling like a long-winded story or something like that, you could use process instructions like, there you go. If you see them smiling, there you go. Doing a great job. Making all the changes you need. Whatever like that, just very quick, straightforward suggestions. You don't have to say like, with every breath and every smile, you're starting to feel amazing and you're knowing deep inside that you can run a 6-figure business and ultimately be more successful because you've got the confidence. Too many words, way too many, and you will forcibly interrupt that trance. Remember, if you think you have the best suggestion for your client, I guarantee their unconscious mind has one that's 1,000,000 times more powerful, but you will never know what it is, and you don't have to. So regardless of what you choose to use, remember, the trance itself will do all the work it needs to do. Techniques and strategies do not solve problems. Untying knots and the unconscious moments that go into a trance does all the work. Clients pay you to untie their knots. They don't pay you to go into trance like a formal hypnotic trance. Trance is a benefit. It's an aggregate. It's what happens as a result of untying all those knots. It's the thing that gets associated after untying all those knots. Okay, it's the response to untying the knots. You don't put a client into trance and then tell them suggestions because that's not what therapy is about. You untie the knots first. And from that, if a trance happened. If not, regardless, they have their breakthrough. So that's my view on therapy very quickly. Okay, it's probably the shortest part of the actual breakthrough because it's the least important. Once you untie the knots, that's the most important part. Okay. So now let's look at testing. So alongside with this testing example, you guys will also have the testing course that you guys have access to. Well, it goes in a lot more detail, give you even all the testing questions, but I'll give you an overview here. Go check out that course as well. You'll have access to that at the same time. Plus all the demos. There was one specific demo with Tiffany, which I'll mention here as well, that I did a lot of testing. Go check out her demonstration and you'll see me do a lot of testing. So testing. So these are just metaphors for what testing really is. Once a new insight is perceived in the trance, it's all connected. A client sort of snaps out of this thing, the processing stops, is complete. You must test it to make sure the new resource is possible. So how you do this is you look at your client, you ask your client, like, how do you feel now? Client says, wow, I just feel amazing right now. So if it's a positive response, you want to loop it back onto the original problem. As you feel amazing right now, think about the problem. How does that feel? Well, it doesn't feel like I have a problem anymore. What do you mean? How do you know? Do a little bit of testing there. Well, I just feel like I'm really powerful now. Okay, so how do you know you feel powerful? You get straight into the testing process. but I've looped it back onto the original problem to connect it. It's like putting a lid back on a jar. So once complete, like once you've looped it back, you want to start testing to break the new resource. So by doing this, you're saying, you want to put doubt into the testing so it starts to break. You want the new resource to break to some extent, where a client says, no, the new resource feels good here. However, I just thought of this, and this might stop me from being a non-smoker. That's the next knot. And you repeat this over and over until you find all the knots. So once you find the next knot, just go back to the investigation phase and follow all those steps again. It just means your client has basically said, hey, here's my next little problem, and my next one, and my next one. Just fix them all on the spot, guys. And you'll find with each knot you untie, it gets quicker and quicker and quicker because they're still in trance. They're in the right place to untie all these sorts of things. So once you find the next knot, start the investigation phase again and follow each step and again and again and again. Now you'll know all the knots are untied because your client just can't find any negativity at all in regards to the problem. So you want to repeat this until all the knots are untied. So remember, with each knot, a formal trance may begin. So go look at Zanara's example again. She went in 2 or 3 times. That was 2 to 3 different knots. It's almost like saying she had 2 to 3 different sessions in one. That's a brilliant example of it. Or the formal trance might only occur once all the knots are untied. So let's say you untie a knot and your client doesn't drop into trance. It doesn't matter. You might have to untie all 5, and then the next thing you look at your client and they're just out cold. That's just how it is, guys. Clients go into trance the way they go into trance. So remember, with each knot, a formal trance may begin, or the formal trance might only occur once all the knots are untied. So the overall goal with a client's problem, guys, is to untie everything. Connect them to as many positive resources as you can. These are the things, the aha moments they'll have, the insights they'll have about the problem. Test them all and make them robust. Find any loose ends. The loose ends are just maybe a knot that you've missed or something that might unravel everything. That could cause too many sessions to be needed. Test the entire thing, everything you've done, all the resources, all the knots, all the problems, all the resources. Test it all and leave no stone unturned. And like I said, you have the testing course, which I'll show you how to do that. If you want to see the testing again, watch Tiffany's demonstration, the second training as well. You'll see an example of testing and doing thorough testing. Now, the knots, the rope, the loose ends, that's just metaphors for what I'm trying to explain here. It seemed to have made a lot of sense to you guys, but that's the way I look at it, okay? And you just want to untie everything possible. Let your client just go into it's like untying all the knots and giving your client a key to a door. They walk through the door and there's just no problems in this new place. They're in this new environment where there's no problems. They can go there. They can pick as many resources as they like, positive. They can come back out the door. They can lock the door behind them, and now their life's going to change. That's essentially the same thing. All right, so that's testing. So now let's look at demarcation. So once the whole intervention is complete, all the testing's done, the knots have been untied, your client has stopped processing, they're looking good, feeling good, it's now time to formally end the session. And this takes 10 seconds to do. You just want to create a demarcation between trance and normal conscious thinking. So just ask your client, hey, do you know what the time is? Or, I noticed that watch. What type of watch is that? Are your kids at school today? I noticed you drove up in a brand new BMW. What's that one like? Whatever it is, just get them thinking normal conscious. Like, I like those shoes. Where did you get them from? Just something like that. The question should snap your client out of trance so the unconscious mind can start processing without having the conscious mind interfering, because it's going to keep processing for a while. It's like saying, okay, unconscious mind, you go to that corner. Conscious mind, you go to that corner. Leave each other alone. Don't you dare talk to each other until the unconscious mind is ready. It'll then tell you what's ready. Then you guys can come together and be the one person again, just as an example. So from there, now we're going to look at something called conscious tasking and sleep tasking. And this is the integration chat, the processing chat as well. So conscious tasking. So once the demarcation is complete, you want to start conscious or sleep tasking alongside the integration chat. Think of this as putting the lid back on the jar. So conscious tasking is the testing's done. And you can actually do this before the testing. If you want to, you can do it after. There's no really right or wrong place. But it's better when the client's more conscious. You could ask them, what's the smallest thing you can do to create the biggest breakthrough? So let's say my client wants to quit smoking. Breakthrough's done. I say, great. Demarcation's done, testing's done, everything's done. So, okay, so just out of curiosity to help today's breakthrough, what's the smallest thing you can do, as in conscious, to create the biggest breakthrough? Clients say, well, I'm definitely not going to buy cigarettes anymore. Perfect. That's the one smallest thing they can do. Just something small, guys. You don't want to tell a client what's the biggest thing you can do, because then you're telling a client, hey, go find as many options as possible. Client will get overwhelmed and it goes unconscious again. Okay, just something small. Then you want to let them know, hey, just before you leave, you want to let your client know that for the next hour or even the next few days, they might feel a bit confused. And this is totally normal. So I tell my client, hey, might be a bit confused. You might not be able to think straight. It might seem a little bit odd. You might have a bit of a bad emotion, good emotion. You might even find yourself just laughing for no reason. Totally normal. Let it happen. And I'll let my client know this is just what we call processing. It's just the unconscious mind, like trying all the new cool solutions, going to find the best fit for you. So your solution, the breakthrough you have, will just get even better. So you want to inform your client of how the mind and the process works and the new solutions and why it does this. Okay, pretty obvious. So sleep tasking, from there, you could tell your client, hey, to even make this thing better, the best thing you can do is go have a sleep to speed it up, or go do something that'll keep your mind off everything. Go to a movies, go pick up your kids, go do something, go for a coffee with your husband, whatever it is. Just basically tell them, hey, conscious tasking, processing time, but also the best thing they could do if they can afford it is go to bed, go have a sleep, text me when you wake up. And again, I talk about this in the testing program, but that's all of it put together. And this last part of the session should take 1 minute, if that. Very, very simple. Now, here's the funny thing, guys. Even if you forget this very last thing, it doesn't matter. I've forgotten this a ton of times, thought, shit, I missed it. It's going to screw everything up. No, it's the investigation that does all the work. If I screwed that part up and just did this part, nothing would work. So these are just added niceties. They're always good to remember, but if you forget them, doesn't matter. The testing you definitely want to remember, the investigation and the unconscious moments and the processing and all that stuff, and untying the knots, you want to remember that. These are just the last ditch efforts to put a nice little icing on the cake, so to speak. So that's pretty much it, guys. So let me just recap on these principles. Completely detach from how hypnosis should look and sound, outcomes, solving a client's problem, size of a problem, categories of a problem, caring about your client's problem, prearranged techniques and scripts, conclusions to where all client problems come from, or even how breakthroughs should look and sound. When a client can no longer perceive the problem the same way and has choice in their thinking and the problem, that's when the problem does not exist. So number 2, if you're feeling pressure, it means you're trying to do something specific. Take a step back, stop trying to do anything. Number 3, do not separate problems into categories of size and intensity. Still, however, work inside your means and scope. Number 4, regardless of the problem, start in the same place. Start with, what's the problem? Always start there. Slow down to speed up. If you rush any part of the intervention, you'll slow it down. Number 5, there are no wrong questions. All roads lead to Rome. Ask questions with the least amount of words. No questions based on a solution. Also, ask questions no one is willing to ask. Number 6, forget about single sessions, multiple sessions, or length of time. Treat real problems, not symptoms. Do not prepare for anything. Number 7, all clients find their own solutions and choice. They find their own solutions and choice. Find their own solutions and choice. Just tattoo that on the back of your hand if you need to. That is key here. Your goal is just to lead them there. Clients, number 8, clients do not have to go into a quote unquote formal trance or have a massive breakthrough on the spot. It doesn't mean it hasn't worked, as long as they've got choice again in their problem. Do not go looking for specific things. All clients go into trance their own way and have a breakthrough in their own way. Also, processing time and integration time allow for the natural unconscious emerging phenomena to take place. These are the aha moments or the new insights into the new solution. Number 10, hypnosis and trance becomes the icing on the cake. The therapy, the untying of the knots, and the unconscious moments are what creates breakthroughs. So there we have it, guys. A very simple process, very natural, very fluid. Remain flexible when you're doing this. And again, you've been to the training. You have access to all the trainings in the future as well, based on this ACH training. Watch the demos. Keep an eye out for more demonstration breakdowns with commentary. Put all this stuff together, and you guys will have, I think, one of the most powerful therapeutic systems in the world, but also definitely the quickest. So enjoy, guys. If you have any questions, like always, please let me know. Bye for now.